was 100% committed, all in, showed up for the group calls. And then I had a random physical from a doctor's appointment and had some very earth-shattering news. So then I kind of rewinded back because I was like, I don't know if investing my time in this is really worth it. I need to take care of my health. But honestly, it ended up being a supportive thing. The group calls were really supportive because you find relatable things that everybody's going through, what you're going through, like you're never alone. And then just repositioning what is important to me. What do I want to spend my time doing? And what do I enjoy doing? Because if I'm getting a new lease on life, what do I want to do to where I am creating the life I want, spending time with the people I care about, and growing and becoming the person I want to be?
Hi, I'm Blake Schofield, founder and CEO of The Bridge to Fulfillment, mom to 3, USA Today top 10 professional coach, and former corporate executive who got tired of sacrificing my life for a comfortable paycheck. My mission is to expand women's perspectives and empower them to achieve greater impact at home and work without sacrifice. This is The Bridge to Fulfillment. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Bridge to Fulfillment. Today, I'm super excited to have my client Danielle on to share her personal story and journey. And one of the reasons I invited her was watching how inspiring her journey has been for me personally, but I think for a number of women in the program. There's something really beautiful when you have the ability to manage so many challenges going on in your life and yet show up and continue to learn and continue to seek guidance and help and achieve really amazing things through all of it. And for me, that was a huge inspiration to watch you do this. And so I'm excited for you to be able to share some about your personal journey in the Bridge to Fulfillment, what you've learned about yourself and what sort of transpired through that journey. But I also think one of the beautiful things about your story is often we can think that we need to have perfect circumstances or the perfect time to be successful, creating change or doing something in our lives. And you did not have that. And you are a testament to show that when you put your mind and your focus behind creating change, you don't need perfect circumstances because you don't. That's the lie our brain tells us. And so, like I said, it was an honor and inspiration to be a part of this journey with you. And I'm excited to sort of dive in and share a little bit of that with our audience today. So with that said, welcome to the Bridge to Fulfillment podcast, Danielle.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, so happy to have you. Can you share a little bit with our audience? What was going on in your life when we connected? And just a little bit maybe about your background as well.
Yeah. So when we connected, I had actually just switched jobs and I was about 4 months into kind of a new career path. But before that, I've spent 15 years in escalating roles of different merchandising and planning categories on the retail side. And then most recently, I had switched to the supplier side to kind of see if maybe that was the balance I was looking for, and it wasn't. So I was like, you know what? I need to figure out what's going on. And I had a friend who'd gone through your program who recommended me to you. And that is how we connected.
I love it. And often that happens where I have women who have made a change on their own and usually within 9 to 12 months end up here and go, okay, this thing didn't work. How did you know? Because 4 months is pretty quickly. What were the signs and symptoms for you where you're like, oh, this didn't solve my problem? And yeah, I see I'm having a pattern where I need some help to see things differently.
I think it was the parts of my old job that I did really love were not a part of this job. And it was more the parts of this job were the parts I didn't necessarily love about my old job. So it just magnified much quicker. And part two, I moved when I created this new job back to where I was from. So I thought, hey, you know what? I'm moving jobs. I'm going to be where I want to live. Everything should skyrocket from there. And living here has been great. So that part was solved. But then I was still feeling unfulfilled at work. And, I have always loved working, since I was a child, started babysitting and everything. So to not have any sort of fulfillment out of that, not that it needs to be my main fulfillment, but was kind of a challenge for me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so when we connected, how did that go for you? And what were some of the questions that you were sort of sorting through? Because I think anytime we reach this sort of crossroads or moment when we're saying, hey, I'm actually thinking about investing in myself and getting help. We all go through our own personal journey of the things we think through, the questions we have. What was that like for you?
I was maybe in a little bit different position because I did know somebody who had just recently completed your program. So I felt a little more confident in the program than if I had probably just found you off LinkedIn, to be totally transparent. But I do think a lot of the questions were around time investment, really choosing myself first. Probably the timing just really worked out for me because I think I was finally at a place where I was like, you know what, I have to do this. Something's got to change. So I do think those were there. And I think also just I would have probably asked more about credibility and success stories. I mean, I think we talked through some of your success stories, but just since I had a personal recommendation, I wasn't as hard hitting on those as I probably would have been. But
So you mentioned that, and yeah, what I remember is you had a lot of questions around how much time does it take for the program? You had to travel. Would you have enough time to do this? Obviously, you had just moved, so that creates its own host of time and financial challenges. And then
I bought a house 3 weeks before I started this program too. So that's why I was like, I'm going to invest all this money. I've just literally paid a ton of money. So I do remember, you're right. I forgot about that. But yes, that is a good point.
And I think often we can allow those things to stop us from taking the action we know is right for us. What was it for you that allowed you to step into it, despite all of the things that you had going on, despite the challenges, despite the travel, despite having just moved? What was it for you that said, yeah, it's the right thing, and I'm going to, even though my circumstances aren't perfect, I'm going to move forward?
I think I was just tired of feeling at a plateau. I mean, I technically was not at a plateau in my career. I had just switched jobs. I've been promoted in the last few years. There was still a lot of upward mobility, but emotionally and mentally, I felt kind of plateaued. I'm doing this, but I'm not really invested in it. So I think it was more I have to regain some sort of drive around what I'm spending the bulk of my hours doing every day.
Yeah. I've always been like you, where I have a passion and a joy around working. Can't ever imagine just sitting home. That sounds
I would be broke if I was sitting at home because all I would do is spend money because I wouldn't know what to do with myself. So
I cannot fathom that. So I think often people who aren't wired like we are don't understand, but the importance of I get up and I spend a huge chunk of my life doing this thing, and I want to feel passionate about what that is. And I think when you talk about being plateaued, yeah, technically you weren't plateaued, you were growing. And I think often that happens to women. And they're saying, well, all their friends and family are like, well, what are you talking about? You have this great career. You're continuing to get promoted. But internally, that can feel like a plateau when it's wait, I'm not learning and growing anymore. I'm not passionate and excited and energized. And I just want to stop here for a moment and say that, if anytime we experience that, it's very easy for us to go into a guilt and shame spiral, and we quote unquote should be happy. We quote unquote should be grateful. But that's the lie. Because we can be grateful and we can also want more.
Right. Agree.
And it's okay to want more. And I would say that that's the inner voice actually telling you there's misalignment in what I'm doing. And it's an opportunity to really step up and level into something even better. And so I love how you did that. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit, but I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey. So you decided, yep, I have a friend that's in this program. I'm ready to do this thing. I'm tired of being plateaued. I'm going to jump in and kind of get started. And I'd love to hear, as you came into the program and you got started, what were you expecting walking in? And then how was the journey different than what you expected?
I think, okay, so walking in, I think my expectation was it's going to be very you're doing a class, a course at school. So I would come in, there's a curriculum essentially. To an extent, there kind of is, but you do the curriculum and then we have the meetings and chat with others. And that is kind of more like a small discussion group. It's kind of in my mind what I had envisioned. And then at the end, you're like, okay, this is where I'm going. It's kind of what I had envisioned, or this is what I'm worth from a negotiation standpoint, or something to that extent. I would say technically, those things did happen, but I think I started in the program and I was one of the personality tests is what kind of person are you, or what, how do you operate? And I'm dive in 1,000%, pretty much every single thing I do all the time. I mean, that validated that. I mean, I kind of already knew that about myself, but I'm all in at the very beginning. So like the first 2 weeks, I was 100% committed, all in, showed up for the group calls. And then I had a random physical from a doctor's appointment and had some very earth-shattering news, I would say, from a health perspective. So then I kind of rewinded back because I was like, I don't know if investing my time in this is really worth it. I need to take care of my health. But honestly, it ended up being a supportive thing for both, because I think the group calls, or from what I was saying, the class discussions, were really supportive because I think, like, one, you find relatable things that everybody's going through what you're going through. Like, you're never alone. I didn't necessarily talk a ton about my health on those calls because it was more of a distraction than dealing with my other issues. But I think just the support in the community, I think there was a lot more around like just getting my life organized to where I could maximize my productivity and still have time to deal with the things I needed to deal with. So I think the time commitment thing went away a little bit. I did probably slow down a little bit more than I had anticipated just because I had to go to a lot of doctor's appointments. And then during the program, just repositioning what is important to me. And I think one thing that since I was going through kind of a health scare that was very terrifying, I really maximized the more like, what do I want to spend my time doing? And what do I enjoy doing? Because if I'm, for lack of a better word, getting a new lease on life, what do I want to do to where I am creating the life I want, spending time with the people I care about, and growing and becoming the person I want to be? So I think I did take away all of that from the program.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, first of all, thank you for sharing. I think these are the realities of life, because while you were in the program, it was not just you that had health problems. I had 2 or 3 other women with some major health problems. And I've come to really see the link behind the pressure and hustle and all of the things that we do for decades that eventually catch up with us many times in our late 30s, 40s, and 50s. And we often don't realize how much those things impact our life and our health because it's just the way it is. And everybody everybody's exhausted. This is stuff I used to say, well, when I got shingles at 28 and I thought, well, isn't that an old person disease? And they said, well, the only way you can get that is stress. And I thought, well, I'm great at handling stress. Clearly I was not. And then I found other people who were also young who had it. And so I went, oh, I'm not that much of an outlier. And when I had huge knots in my shoulder all of the time because of the stress I carried, I found other people that had the same problem. And I said, oh, not that bad. And so I think often it's the silent cost that we're missing. Mm-hmm. Of leading the life that's misaligned, of the levels of stress and anxiety, of the pressures that we put on ourselves that show up. And like I said, I've had probably at this point 15 or 20 clients in the last 5 years go through some major health scares while in the program. And I can see and connect the dots back to the lack of self-care and the push that just eventually caught up. And to your point, it's a beautiful moment to then stop and say, how do I want to make it different? And I do have a new lease on life, and how do I use that to my advantage? And I think you did that with such incredible grace because through the majority of the program, most of the women did not know what you were going through and were inspired by the action and the progress you were making. B, you were really great about saying to me, this is what I'm going through and I'm trying to figure out how to deal with it. And you allowed me to be that partner to you to say, okay, how can we do this? Because I knew that this work was going to help reduce your stress, was going to help you be better equipped to deal with your doctor's visits and your health challenges, was going to help make sure that you had the right foundation. And I appreciated the whole way throughout that we were in partnership together about how is it going and what do we need to change and what really matters in this process for you. And again, I think we can get into a black and white perspective about, I need this perfect time. I need these perfect circumstances. I have to do everything perfectly to be successful. And that's the lie. And that's what I think is so beautiful about your story is you didn't have the perfect circumstances coming in. Then you got hit with something that certainly wasn't the perfect circumstance. And in that journey, you learned how to prioritize what mattered. You learned how to prioritize your health while doing your day job, while going through this program, and while learning to give yourself grace in a different way. And I just, like I said, it was very inspirational to me. And then towards the end of the program, when you were through that and able to share with a number of the women, I watched how inspirational that was to them. And I just want to shine the light on that because it's really beautiful. And I think you truly are an example of how you can go through challenges with grace. And a huge part of how you went through that with grace is taking a partnership and not doing it your own. really stopping and saying what matters to me instead of it having to be this perfect scenario or perfect circumstance. And I think we can all learn from that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And, I think honestly, if I hadn't probably been in the program, the health situation would have been way worse. I mean, I would have handled it significantly worse. I do think you're right to the point of the partnership. That's not something I've always been great at, I'm a very direct person in general. So I usually just say the point and move on. So building that vulnerability in an appropriate way, I think was a huge thing for me. So I do appreciate the partnership as well.
Yeah. So you said one of the big things that you learned was to manage your time more efficiently. How has that changed your life since you've been doing that now for a number of months? How has that impacted your day-to-day life, your stress levels, and what that looks like?
My stress level is very low. I, at this moment, still do have a full-time job. I started my little business on the side, but I am so much better about creating boundaries with others at work. When I need to do a project, I actually work on the project. And even when people call me 47 times during the middle of that project, I just don't answer. And I'm like, I'm working on this. I'll call you back when I'm done. So I think implementing boundaries around the times I'm doing what I need to do every day. And then I'm just so much more efficient because I don't feel like I need to answer every call and do everything as everything's on a fire drill. Mm-hmm. So I do think that's helped pretty significantly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the life of everything is a fire drill. We get so used to that, but we don't even understand the amount of cortisol and literally chemicals in your body that are making you sick living life that way. So just to even be able to move from a place where everything was rush, to nope, there's a peace and a calm. There's, again, a huge hidden benefit underneath that we don't always see, but you do feel as you feel more calm and more centered and more focused. You mentioned a little bit about launching a side business. That was one of the things when you came to me that you were like, hey, in this ideal world or down the road, I might want to launch this thing. Can you share a little bit about your journey to clarity, about figuring out, this is why I'm unfulfilled and what I need and want, and how that sort of come to fruition for you?
In my 15-ish years on the retail buying side, there were aspects of my job that I really loved. And I think, I continued to put myself through the rat race and continued to be super committed to that because there were aspects that I really, really enjoyed. And I don't know that I would have identified those aspects on my own. I think going through the program and, really reflecting on hey, when I used to be excited to go to work on these days, it was because we were doing this, this, and this. So coming to clarity of these are the 5 items I like to do. And then one thing that's great about your program is, you don't have to go off on your own. You can find it within another company. But I've decided I really want to help smaller retailers who are trying to scale. And they don't have the tools or the knowledge from being at large corporations, where I have predominantly been at very large corporations and have all that skill set. So how can I train them and teach them to do the processes so it can make their life easier to run whatever their business is? Or if they're trying to grow their business, how do I help them scale to grow their business appropriately? And I think I just definitely get way more fulfillment out of that than doing it for a large company. So I think part 1, that was there from clarifying what I actually liked about my job. And like you said, I saw other women who liked certain aspects of their job, but were maybe in a completely different career path, and watching them change, I think also gives you some more assurance that you can do this. And then it also gave me some strength as far as, okay, I'm going to do this. Now I need to take the steps and start the networking process to find some clients to really more validate this is what I want to do. So I think both of those aspects happen. And so I found a client, and I have one client right now. I've been working with them for about 2 months, kind of on the side, just to make sure since I had the health issues and everything, I want to make sure that I'm fully set up to leave and still pay my medical bills.
100%. And that was such an exciting moment when everything came together for you. And again, every single woman's journey is different in the Bridge to Fulfillment. I think that's a really important thing to understand, because when you are lacking clarity, you start looking at, this person has my background and they did this, so maybe that's the thing I should do. But you found your correct path. One of my favorite periods of time together in this journey was really working with you on bridge stories and on how to really understand the value you bring and communicate it, and be able to feel confident in positioning that What are some of your learnings or some of your favorite moments looking back on what you gained from that experience?
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, that process was really great. I can't believe I didn't mention it because I think to the point of where I said earlier, like I'm a fairly direct person. So I have always spoken bullet points, very like, this is XYZ. And I think the bridge stories was really great because it really forced me to tell the story around like the thought process and what makes me different. And I've had a lot of really complex situations in my career that I've done a ton of different things, worn a ton of different hats, and I wasn't necessarily giving myself credit for that. So building the stories to have the credit that I deserved. And then part two, having that information available for when I'm pitching to new clients. Now it's much easier. I have a Rolodex of stories that apply to 4,700 different situations. So communicating that is much easier.
Awesome. Yeah. For me, it was fun. I love the process a lot of times because it is tailored. And by nature of that, it's like, oh, how are you looking at this? And how do people perceive what you're saying? And for me, it was a beautiful situation because there were times as we went through that I think you had the aha moment of like, oh, that's why I didn't get what I wanted in the past. Yeah. Or, oh, I now understand why I got pigeonholed in XYZ. Or, oh, I now see how this person got that thing I wanted, because I now see the gap between how I was communicating what they want. And there's such huge power in that. I mean, to me, the bridge story process is one of my absolute favorites because it's like I get to equip you with these amazing tools to really understand how to showcase who you are and your value and ask for what you want. And that to me, when I learned those skills, it totally changed the game for me in my career and life. And the level of confidence and ability that you have after that, as well as just to be more present in your conversations with people so that you can relate more and you can adapt more in the moment. It's a beautiful thing. When I watched you like connect and get that, and it was not very shortly thereafter, once you got it, that you ended up going to this networking situation, ended up getting your first client. I was like, oh yeah, she's got it now. And like, now it's like, look out world, she's got it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think one of the big things is that I never noticed how much I said, like, I think, and that comes across like very, and like not confident and inexperienced. Like I never even processed that. So now I'm very conscious to not say, oh, I think XYZ. It's more like I did XYZ.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And even to the big thing for me, for you, from what we went through is like how you were describing what you were doing. You were really into some of the very low level tactical things, but you were ignoring the big, huge strategy things that you actually did. And so to your point, you weren't giving yourself credit because you were showcasing the things that you executed well, but without the bigger, higher level strategy and approach would never have been successful. And so it was a shift for you when you were like, oh yeah, I actually do all these things. And yes.
Because I think one day you were like, okay, so did you do this? And I was like, no, I was actually leading like a team of 12. And you were like, what? I was like, oh, yeah. So yes, you're right. That was a huge change for me as well. Because you're right. The strategy part is what I want to do. I don't want to be interim POs, for example, but I do know how to do all that. And I have done all of that. So you're right. That is a very valid point of how I've changed the story of what I'm telling others to the actual facts of what I was doing.
Yeah, you're giving the much more well-rounded understanding of the impact that you're making versus what I think a lot of us are taught, which is like, how do I show you the tangible tactical stuff? But the reality is the more you move up in your career from a higher impact, the more you need to be able to show that global impact in the total picture. And so that ability for you to see and understand that, right, is a huge then leg up for everything to come. Mm-hmm. So it's been so much fun reconnecting with you. I'm so glad to hear the consulting gigs going well and your stress levels are down and you're enjoying what you're doing. Let me ask you, is there anything that I haven't asked you so far that I should have, or anything that's just really on your heart that you want to share that you haven't already?
I think one thing the program also adds that I probably haven't included is like more just accountability, because I feel like we're all driven to do what we need to do, but sometimes you just need that extra push of accountability to stay on the path. And I think the duration of the program really helps with that because you finally have built the habits and then you're accountable for them every week. So I do think that's one thing that is a very important aspect that I didn't really think about when I was going through the program that would add for me, but it did.
I love that. If I was going to ask you, I'm going to throw in one more because it just came to me. If I was going to ask you one thing that your perspective has changed on as a result of going through this journey, maybe the thing that the mantra or the thing you now know to be true that maybe you didn't before you joined the Bridge to Fulfillment.
I think I have a lot less fear, I guess, because one of the group sessions we kind of talked about, like, when you're going through something, like, think about all the times that you've actually done it before. And I have figured my way out of every situation. So regardless of what happens, the good and the bad, I'll figure it out. And I think that has been the biggest, probably, mindset shift from the program.
I love that mantra. Regardless of whatever happens, I'll figure it out. And what a huge piece of gold, because when you can believe in yourself in that way, it enables you to step into whatever it is that you really want for your life, even if it's completely unknown. So thank you, Miss Danielle. It's been an honor and such a pleasure. And I just appreciate you taking time to share your journey and help inspire other women.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So thank you for joining us. And until next time, have a great week ahead.
Thanks for joining me today. Rather than hope the grass will be greener, identify what the right next step is. We can help you do just that. Get clarity on where you are in your journey to career fulfillment, where you're headed, optimal paths to get there, and the right next step to take. Start your complimentary personalized career fulfillment plan at www.thebridgetofulfillment.com/plan. Again, you can get your personalized career fulfillment plan at thebridgetofulfillment.com/plan. Thanks again for joining and have a great week ahead.